Okay,
I'm so much
Okay, here we go. So, with this, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So that's the first part. So, does it say you have freedom of religion? It doesn't say that at all, does it? What it says is Congress will make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So Congress cannot make a law saying the state religion of the United States is Catholic or Druid or whatever you want.
That makes sense, though.
But it doesn't mean anything you want to be a religion. You know, I have the church of stealing money from freshmen. And you can't stop me from doing that because it's my religion. You can't make a... Yeah, the church of we must all hold. So, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. It does not say anything you want is a religion. Now, everybody write this down. Write down the establishment clause. That means it cannot establish a religion. There can be no state religion. Why? The English Civil War. Protestant versus Catholics. Or, more importantly, the 30 Years' War, which killed a third of Central Europe.
What is the clause called?
Establishment clause. They didn't write this because they were against religion or for religion. They wrote it because they didn't want a religious war. That's what they feared. So that is why the United States would have, eventually it would be called separation of church and state. It's not written there because the term actually hadn't been coined yet. But that's what it means. A fear of that. But it doesn't mean you can have any church you want. Yeah.
That's right, maybe one establishment clause, or didn't you write more?
Just establish religion. As long as you know what it means, you should be fine. But we're not done yet. This is a huge amendment. Look at the paper towel. Now, it's a little bit awkward, but here it goes. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Did you catch how that works?
They can't force you
To shut up. But it doesn't say you have freedom of speech.
No.
You can't say anything you want. You can't go into a crowded theater and yell. Yeah, because you're going to be fun.
Everybody uses that example, make it original.
No, but that's actually the reason I use that one is because that would be part of a constitutional ruling in the court case U.S. versus Shrek. So it's not just a rap. This was actually used as an example in the Supreme Court.
Oh, that's why it's always example.
Yeah.
Someone did that, and then it went all the way to the Supreme Court and the whole case on it.
No, it wasn't actually that. It was used as an example, but why there could be a ban on free speech. He didn't have to go to the theater and yell fire.
I mean, people have done that though.
Oh yeah,
People have been arrested for that.
because people are there are enough sociopaths around. I'm looking around at you.
We should go to a field trip. Field trip.
So you can't say anything you want. There are limits to speech. So, I know it's not a huge line, but it's a major difference in saying you have a freedom of speech, isn't it? I'm not saying that not from now on. You don't go around telling everybody, you've got to shut up because we can't say anything we want. But rights aren't always as you think. It's much more complex. And that's why we need to know these things about the Bill of Rights. Let's get to the next one. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of the press. So that's the media. At that time it was newspapers and pamphlets. They can't ban newspapers just because. But it doesn't mean there can be unlimited news. There can be censorship. They would argue in times of national emergency, they would come up with other reasons, but you don't have blanket freedom of the press. Which is a real problem now because the press is, there's so few news sources left anymore. Hardly any. Yeah, trust YouTube. Yeah, there are so few news sources that this is actually a real issue. Next, we have monopolies. That's one. I know it's so weird. We have the internet where you get like any sources from all over, and it's all the same sources.
Dude, I know vaccines cause autism. What's the deal with that?
You're what?
Vaccines cause autism. That means the deal with that. You know, told me must be true.
Must be true. The YouTube said it.
Must be true.
Next,
It is what it is.
Congress shall make no law Abridging the right of the people to assemble. I know it's a little awkward. To peaceably assemble.
Abridging the right.
Of the people to assemble. So you can assemble. But can you assemble? Because it doesn't define not only what an assembly is, but what's peaceable. What body in government enforces the laws? Do you remember?
Executive.
The executive branch. Who defines what peaceable is?
The president.
Or the governor in a state, or does that make sense? Do you get the point here? It's not always what you think. It's much more complex than that. Now, he did that with the idea being that we need flexible laws, but he also liked his strong government. Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to petition. I know. You can petition government.
A lot of people use that now.
People do all the time.
Yeah.
Do they have to read it? Do they have to care what you say? Now trust me, you get on a politician, and enough people do it. They notice. Protest works, but they don't like it.
You got there so important to get your point across.
That's, yes. Right.
Let's not say that again.
No,
Yes.
Aren't there people that like cause riots or something like that? So would there be a peaceful riot and then turn it into an actual?
so they make it go from peaceful to dangerous, explosive, is how I put it. Yeah, but
Are you talking about
I guess there
the
could be.
police?
I mean, those people are just crazy, but yeah.
But, do you catch the point here? There's a lot of gray area, isn't there, in the rights? So you think, I have a freedom of speech. And, add a big asterisk here. Up until 1867, this only applied to federal law. State laws didn't have to follow the Bill of Rights. This was only federal law. It's going to be the big revolution, our second revolution, which will be the Civil War, 1867. All of these only apply to federal government. And so nowhere, in fact, there are still states that have established religions up until the 1830s in the United States. It only applied to federal law. The Civil War is like our second revolution. What we think of as the country is really going to be created by the Civil War. Everything from now on for the next month will be just leading to the Civil War.
We're right in the middle.
What?
Yeah, that it was.
Yeah.
Did the internet tell you?
When was it?
1867. The 14th. The 14th Amendment. It'll be the 14th Amendment. The most important part of the Constitution is actually the Amendment. All right, let's get to another one that's really controversial, especially after the 1970s, the Second Amendment. And people talk about my Second Amendment right, my Second Amendment right. Well, Madison wrote this specifically because states wanted a militia to put down slave rebellions. That's why whenever people say, I'm for my Second Amendment rights, I always want to say, oh, you want a militia to put down slave rebellions. Of course, people wouldn't get it.
Because they don't understand history.
Good point. So here's a cartoon talking about what we think of the Second Amendment of having weapons. This is against unlimited Second Amendment rights, which I think is hilarious, but that's why people look at it. Like now you can have all kinds of different weapons, so maybe we should have restrictions. Here is, for unlimited Second Amendment rights, whatever that might mean, saying a line of citizens protecting us from tyranny. Nobody at the founding talked about personal weapons. This was all about militia. In fact, the big argument was in the first Congress was about standing army. Should we have standing army? This is not about personal weapons. Why? Well, first off, you notice how poorly this is written? Look at this. What? First off, we got to know what words meant. A well-regulated militia. So militia is the informal soldiers, they have farmers or merchants. What's regulated mean?
In command.
Yeah, and wait, it's a good way to say trained. You're right. Organized. It can't just be a bunch of yahoos with thermonuclear bombs saying, I'm a militia.
Right.
I'm a militia!
Didn't they try to form a militia in like Virginia before COVID happened?
Oh, there's informal, a private militia was in Michigan to try to, just last week, they tried to kidnap the governor.
Yeah.
Oh.
And they got arrested.
And by all, trust me,
You guys know-
I saw those guys. They're not regulated. But,
They're kind of stupid.
next, being for the security of a free state. What does that mean? It's literally a state. Like South Carolina. State. Because remember, states wanted to control their militia. That was a big fight in the ratification battle. States wanted to control their militia to put down slave rebellions. Does that make sense? But then the hard part. The right of the people. What's people?
Us.
Not
White people, like dudes.
with property.
Not quite.
White men that own
Even-
property.
Not even that. Do you remember the Constitution begins, we the people?
Oh,
Yes.
The people. Does that, the collective. Does that make sense? The people.
So a collective, not an individual.
It's,
Yeah.
Madison was thinking collective, yes.
Okay.
Now, we could say individual, but that's where you get, wow, these words are kind of.
We need a history teacher to be like our president or something, because they
I'm too busy.
understand the best way.
Next, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. What's an arm?
A gun.
Some are, some
Wait,
aren't.
so you can't.
Yes, I know, arm.
Wait,
Arm.
so You can't have bear arms above your fireplace?
What?
Bear arms?
No, it's actually not it. I've heard people say that too, but
That was nice.
a hunting rifle is not an arm.
Why?
Because it's not. Read the manual. No, it's not. But a tank is.
That's ridiculous. I could have taken the money.
No, no, no. Huh?
Is it something that's protecting you?
Close. A thermonuclear bomb is an arm.
Oh, I know why.
Weapon.
Military weapons. For a militia.
Alright, AK-47.
So you're going to have weapons for a well-regulated militia. A trained militia will have military weapons, which the Constitution says. Congress will provide weapons. Does that make sense? Congress will provide weapons for the militia, and Madison wants to make sure that it would be controlled by the states. So we can have a well-trained militia to put down slave rebellions. Was it about personal weapons? No. How do we know that? Look what Madison first wrote. I'm sorry about the wording. I tried to stop him. I really did. A well-regulated militia composed by the body of the people. Remember, the people. Right, the people that keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, but no one religiously scrupulous of bearing arms, no one religiously scrupulous of being in the military shall be compelled to render military service in person. Today we would say a conscientious objector. Have you heard about that?
Yeah.
A conscientious objector? If you have religious reasons for not being? Yes. And so that's what it says right here. So, the people have a militia, they'll be armed, and if you're religiously scrupulous, you don't have to be part of the militia. But they took it out. Why you get the weird reading of the Second Amendment? I think you can see why. Because if it says, if you're religiously scrupulous of being in the military, you don't have to join. That applies all men who aren't religiously scrupulous must join. And he didn't want it to be like conscription or the draft. And that's why they took that out. And that's why we get the very weird ruling. And up to 2011, the Supreme Court said, yeah, Madison was talking about militia, he's talking about militia. In 2011, the Supreme Court combined this, and we'll get to it, the Ninth Amendment, that say it implies. And this is actually a big, it implies you can have a right to personal weapons, some personal weapons. And that's why, after 2011, the Supreme Court, I mean, this is one of the more radical rulings in history. They said, okay, we're going to say, okay, it implies, but we'll get to the Ninth Amendment. It doesn't say what kind of weapons. So they can be regulated, and we're kind of talking about a gray area right now. You do not have an unlimited right to weapons, even after the 2011 decision, Heller versus DC. That's in your lifetime. That's really not that long ago. Nobody talked about very few people talked about the Second Amendment as a personal right to weapons to the 1970s. Crime was just exploding. Crime was so much higher in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and then today it's not even funny. You people don't know how tough it was. No. The U.S. is pretty dangerous. Still is, but nothing like
So
it was.
crime was more, there was more crime in the 80s than there is now?
Oh, a lot more. And a lot more violent crime now, than now.
Also back then was
No, it was just a lot more crime. People were more violent. Hey, when I first started teaching, there were fights every week. I'd have to break up fights once a week.
Wait, how long have you been teaching?
Longer than you've been alive.
What?
Now, when's the last time there's been a fight? There's never fights.
Last year, the
You got
first
the
day
reach,
of
but I
school,
definitely got the
freshman
Oh yeah.
And that's amazing. That's like, you remember that. I'm not kidding. There's a fight every week. Every week there's a fight. And since I was kind of a big and then young person,
Fight Club. What's about Fight Club?
All right.
Actually,
Oh.
Fight Club.
I'm from a more violent generation. Just don't forget that. Okay, so Third Amendment, really quick. No quartering of troops. Remember the British quartering troops because in the Boston Massacre? Direct correlation. Number 4, the Fourth Amendment. The British were issuing these writs of assistance, blanket search warrants without a warrant. Thus the Fourth Amendment. No unreasonable search and seizure without a warrant. You need a warrant. By the way, do you see the catch?
Unreasonable.
Yeah, define unreasonable.
Hey man, you looked at me funny. That's a reason to search you.
Could be, right? So there are gray areas.
If they see the companion, they will leave your door. They can search your house.
Dude, it was powder
Drugs.
Okay, the Fifth Amendment's like the first one. It's like 5 amendments in one. So we're not going to go through every bit of this. Let's get to one thing. Well, 2 things. You ever heard of double jeopardy?
Yeah.
You can't be tried for the same crime twice.
The juice is loose.
Lunch is air. And I won't force you to testify. Which is awesome. You ever seen like a TV show that said, I plead the fifth? I take the fifth?
You don't have to.
Yeah. You will not be compelled in any criminal case to be witness against himself. That's taking the fifth. But here's the biggie you have to get down for the fifth. Nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without, write down, due process of the law. You cannot be deprived, you cannot be arrested without due process of the law. You have a right to, if let's say you are arrested, to be charged, to eventually have a trial or be released, and you have certain rights while you were there.
It's kind of like
So you can't testify.
Exactly. It's all part of that. And in fact, this is kind of lumped together. It's very close to what we call habeas corpus. You can't be tried without a trial. You cannot be arrested without a trial. So you're exactly right. All those things are part of due process. And once you become adult, you have those rights. You're still kind of in a gray area. You're in school. And since you're in school, the school becomes your parent, and the parent has certain rights over you. Yeah, it's
My parents have rights over me? I have property to them?
not quite. It's not 1820 when children were just good little workers, but
So
that means they can sell me.
what do we write down for the 5th?
just write down the big thing you need to get is due process of the law. Due process of the law. You cannot be deprived of your liberty without due process. This is a big one because this only applied to federal government, but all of a sudden it would go to states, and this would change everything. You now have civil rights after 1867 that did not exist before. After the Second American Revolution, aka Reconstruction, which failed, unfortunately, in some ways, but it did set the stage for our country as we know it now. And then with this, let's get to the Sixth Amendment. This one's quick. You ready? It's exciting. Speedy and public trial. And if you can have assistance of a counsel in your defense. In the 1960s, in the Gideon case, it said that states must provide it. You cannot afford it. But every state has different rules, so it can be consistent. Doesn't mean it has to be quality counsel. Even though if you know anything about public defenders, they're very good and work their tail off and are vastly underpaid. That's a hard job. I have nothing but respect for them. And define speedy.
Fast.
It's always.
Hey, speedy. So, in the whole concept of time, isn't 10 years fast? Do you get my point here? Yeah.
So don't you want to always have a public trial instead of?
Yeah. You want to have a public trial, but
Unless
in
it's
times of
most
war
citizens.
or in internal insurrection, they can go to private trials. Yeah.
We should write for Amendment 7.
For 7?
Yeah.
Only thing about in civil suits, like lawsuits. For big lawsuits, there'll be a trial. And the whole point about that one was that it can't be somebody who's really powerful can sue and take advantage of a friendly judge. So there can be a jury trial for lawsuits. Then it was $20. Now I think it's $2,800.
Yeah.
I think that's the number. It goes up.
Let's go back to $20.
$20. $20 is a lot of money back then. Now, 8, no excessive bail or cruel and unusual punishment. Bail or cruel and unusual punishment. Do we see the gray area here?
Yeah, what's cool?
Yeah, and what's excessive? And think about cruel. Think about execution. And there's a lot of people who believe that execution is cruel. And for that matter, how can we have one method of execution is considered cruel and unusual, and one method is not?
Okay, hanging, cruel and unusual.
Yes.
Okay, hanging, but lethal ejection's okay. Lethal ejection's okay, but impaling somebody on a spike in the public square is wrong.
Let's just
Utah
say.
still has firing squad.
Huh?
Utah still has firing
Yeah.
squad.
They had to go away for it, they came back.
That's the coolest way to go.
I remember when they got rid of they got rid of executions because they were so unfairly done in '72, and then 6 years later, Utah would be the first. They would do the first execution after they brought it back, and it was firing squad.
Wait, so what do we write down for Amendment 9?
Okay, Amendment 9 is kind of a biggie, and by the way, it's written pretty horribly, isn't it?
Yes.
Rights. So people have rights, even if they're not in the Constitution. People have rights even if they're not in the Constitution. So just because it's not in the Bill of Rights doesn't mean you don't have that right. Does that make sense?
So this is the vague amendment.
Exactly. Remember I told you the Second Amendment didn't necessarily provide you personal weapons, but doesn't this kind of? But it's still pretty vague, isn't it? And 10th is almost the same. Powers not given to the U.S. government go to the states. So even if it's not listed in the Constitution, the states have it.
If a right isn't listed in the Constitution,
Okay, for 9, if the right isn't listed, it goes to the people. For 10, if the power isn't given to the federal government, it goes to the states. Slightly different. Now, you might look at that and say, hey, that makes perfect sense to me. Do you see the problem with that? Remember the necessary and proper clause? Isn't that a big gray area? Yeah, this is huge. This is a big deal. But this is also that federal system of separate national government and state government. Bill of Rights is a pretty interesting thing. I wanted you to look at this and say, oh, we have rights or didn't have rights, or, Mr. Partridge says that we're all slaves. Yes, but the point is things are more complex than what they appear. There are gray areas. No, I don't expect you to know it except for the quiz over the Bill of Rights on Friday. But the thing is, we should have a quiz, don't you think?
Yes.
Okay, I'm with you. Yeah.
It's on Fridays, I'm sure.
Are there countries where, like, say, their government isn't able to support their own people or something like that, and they can't do stuff for the states? What happens?
Some countries that don't have the power, some don't. I mean, yeah. So we got to this. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the class about the assumption of the debt. Remember all that? This is from Wednesday's notes. Yes, I will collect them. Most people turn them in. Please get them in as soon as possible. Remember his plan is to get more debt. This is the brilliant part. He wanted people to borrow more money to bind them to the country to get their money back.
that was pretty smart.
That's kind of smart.
It's brilliant. But also, you can see why Jefferson said, hey, that means merchants are nothing more than mercenaries. So this was on Wednesday. By the way, who enjoyed the PSAT test?
It was so
You
awesome.
enjoyed it?
I woke
So
up
much
and
fun.
took another
Dude,
test.
let's talk about the questions.
Hey, standardized test is life. So we talked about the whiskey tax, and farmers would become wage labor. We got right to here, correct? Washington, D.C.
Yes.
So by agreeing to Washington, D.C., the bill passed. What happened with the tax? Small farmers were taxed, and what did they do?
Didn't like it.
That led to another rebellion, a little bit like Shades' rebellion. The Whiskey Rebellion in western Pennsylvania and also western Virginia, they talk about creating their own state, Pennsylvania. Their own country, actually. It was never. Yeah, they did tar and feather a couple of tax collectors. But the big thing about this one was, now the U.S. government is strong. Unlike Shades' rebellion, they put out 12,000 militia, bigger than Washington's army at Yorktown. And Washington at first personally led them. He's commander-in-chief. He put on his old Revolutionary War uniform, and the Secretary of the Treasury, Hamilton, put on his old Revolutionary War uniform. It is just ridiculous to think of the president today doing that. And the Secretary of the Treasury, Stephen Mnuchin, doing that. It's like, but that's what he thought. Yeah.
Don't you think, like, instead of having draft wars, you just put the presidents or leaders of the country to a ring and see who wins?
Have a big tournament, put him, yeah.
That way
It'd be
less
better
people
than-
would die.
Better than a bunch of 20-year-olds dying.
Washington thing?
And they marched up when they
What
moved.
Washington thing?
Washington actually led the militia. He actually found this uncomfortable, and he actually gave a command to Hamilton, who brutally put down the rebellion, arresting people without trial. See some inconsistencies here. And Hamilton was all excited. Washington, even though he thought, okay, the federal government is needed, but putting down farmers, he could see, okay, you can attack small farmers, what if you attack big farmers like him?
Not like that.
No, neither could Madison or Jefferson. And the last couple things then. This would be put down, another tax revolt, but the revolt was not against tax. It was against who was being taxed and why they're being taxed. People generally don't mind taxes as long as they think it's fair. If people don't think it's fair, then they really don't like it. We all might have a different argument on what fair is. So, let's jump right to this. The Bank of the United States. And the Bank of the United States, this would be Hamilton's second big effort. It's also called the BUS. Get it? U.S. Okay, so some agency they call the National Bank. And Hamilton said it's implied. Congress can print money. Congress can borrow. Congress can tax. It's implied they should have a bank under the necessary and proper clause. And he was shocked when Madison, who wrote the thing, would go against him. Madison liked it until he thought he might be the target. And what his plan was, they would create a company, the precursor to what we call a corporation. Remember joint stock companies where shareholders own them? And they would get a contract, a charter. It'd be privately owned. Shareholders would share in the profit, but they must do certain things related to the contract. A corporation is created by the national government. And to this day, they're entities. Corporations do not grow on trees. They don't grow. They're created by people, by government, by laws. What country made the first corporation that we know today? Yes. No, what country? Yes.
Netherlands?
You're so close. Belgium. You're really close. The brand new country of Belgium, 1830. But this is the precursor.
What
It's
was the corporation?
for them bank. But it was the modern style of corporation, and we'll get to it. This is a precursor to a corporation.
Called bank?
No, the one in Belgium was a bank.
Right.
Sorry about that.
No, right.
So, they could sell $10 million in stock. So investors could buy up to $10 million. So they would buy a share of stock. And then Not only that, the U.S. government will give them a $2 million seed money. So they have $12 million total to start the bank. There are no banks in the United States, so Hamilton wanted to create a financial system. And then what would they do with that money? Well, first off, they would collect tax revenues. Tax revenues would go through the National Bank, the Bank of the United States. National Bank's another name for it. I'm sorry, I should have been clear on that. And then they would issue currency. Therefore, they could control the money supply and loan money. This is a piece of currency, $50 from the bank, which is a private bank now across the street from the White House. Still there. And Jefferson, the big thing is to make banks. Let's get to the last thing, because I had screwed up with a thing. I didn't screw up. Chrome just went off. It just literally went off my computer. I had to reboot it. Jefferson and Madison said enumerated powers, and what kind of people will this help?
Rich people.
Not rich people. Madison and Jefferson are rich. The merchant class. And couldn't they manipulate the money supply to get rich?
Yes.
You think they'd ever do that? Of course! It would pass, though, because what person supported it? Yes. And that's where I want to get. Thank you for going a minute late. I'm really sorry. Yeah, quick go, they're going to do the earthquake drill. Oh, we're going to do the earthquake drill. I think it's there tomorrow. So just make sure it comes out, Oh!
Hello, Bruins. Starting today, we will be having weekly contests and activities during lunch. For today's contest, we will be TikToking. Yes, I did say TikToking. So the dance that you will be submitting for a prize is the dolphin dance to Go Daddy Go remix. You can do this in small groups. Remember to stay 6 feet apart and record your dance. Here is the song